Which do you think impacts more people? Someone speaking from the heart, authentically and spontaneously, or a polished motivational speaker?
How it seems to me is it'll impact different people differently. So, for instance, my style of communication, uh, some people, it impacts them very, very deeply. And some people are like, I can't listen to that guy. Talks too slow, boring, doesn't get to the point. Just seems, there doesn't seem to be any content. Different strokes for different folks. So, what I have seen again and again and again is that the more real, authentic, insightful, connected your communication is, the deeper the impact is. So I once heard someone put it, he said, this was a long time ago. He said, you got to decide, do you want to go a mile wide and an inch deep or go an inch wide and a mile deep? And I was like, I'd rather go a mile wide and a mile deep. And he was like, that's not the question I'm asking. But it made sense to me at the time. What I think in terms of is just that notion of signal. The difference between AM and FM radio, AM is amplitude modulation, FM is frequency modulation. And historically, I guess digital radio changes the game, but historically the difference was FM radio was way clearer, had way more signal clarity, but couldn't spread as far. Whereas AM radio could spread far and wide, but it wasn't that clear a signal. The sound fidelity wasn't so good. My sense of deeply authentic, transformational, impactful communication is it tends more towards the FM than the AM. Just because I think there are some memes that carry quicker and further than others. But I don't know that that's true. I don't know that that's true. And we might even be able to find counterexamples of it. But I know, for instance, well, I'll give you a personal example. In 1999, I was given this book, The Missing Link by Sydney Banks. And I quickly, I was told about it by a friend of mine. His son was basically doing this work with corporations. I said, and I was early in the game with NLP at the time, which, as far as I was concerned, was the best thing on earth, and everything else was pretty much shit, right? And so I said to him, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "Well, we get a business person, and then we spend 4 days with them counseling them." I was like, 4 days? That sounds terrible. So anyway, he said, well, why don't you check out this book about it? So I read this book and I'm like, yeah, I know all this and it's too simplistic. And that was the end of that. It's now one of my favorite books. So at the time, I was more tuned in to something that had a really strong AM signal, and the fidelity didn't need to be that high. Now I'm tuned in so much to a high fidelity signal that in the domain of this, domain of psychology and the stuff that we explore, there are very few people who I feel drawn to listen to. The people I feel drawn to listen to are, extreme FM. But I actually have best example I can think of. Check this out. If you were to ask me who's one of the speakers who's had the most profound impact in your life, the answer would be Sydney Banks. Sydney Banks has such a deep understanding of this stuff we're exploring, and he shared it with a clarity and precision, which I find continually surprises me in how extraordinary it is. And if you type his name into YouTube, well, he's got one with, let's see how that one's got 20,000 views. This one's got 17,000 views, then 10,000, then 5,500, then we're 14,000, 9,500. So there's nothing more than about 20,000 views there. Whereas if we type in trying to think who that guy, how about Mr. Beast? Mr. Beast, 58 million views. So his amplitude is through the roof, right? He's got massive amplitude, but his impact is going to be relatively low. Now, I imagine, I've never actually watched a Mr. Beast video, but I imagine he's going to be pretty high on authenticity. I wouldn't be surprised. But in terms of so he'll probably have a lot of signal, but in terms of the transformational impact, it'll probably be low. So I just use it by way of example. And by the way, the metaphor of signal and, amplitude, FM and AM or signal, it's not a perfect metaphor, but in terms of transformational impact, you give a great example. Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is an incredible speaker to do amazing work with groups, all this sort of stuff. As best I can, and very, very bright guy as well. As best I can tell, he's not working with the kind of experience that we're working with. I mean, experience in terms of waking up to who you really are. He's tending to leverage a lot of mental and emotional energy, and to great effect. Like, this is not to diss him in any way, but when I got to the principles, I remember asking one of my mentors once, I said, well, listen, he was like, he says about being in a certain feeling for a lifetime. I said, well, I can do feelings. I can get into any feeling like that, any state. Just tell me, I'll get into it. It's like, well, can you get into a more profound felt experience of life? And I was like, yeah, I don't even know what that is. It's like, okay, can you make yourself feel tickled pink? I'm like, no, I don't think I can do that. So it turns out that the range of experience that I could control through moving levers in my mind and that sort of thing, that was inside a certain box of felt experience. But there's a whole world of experience outside of that wasn't really on the cards. And a way of putting it was all the experiences, all the felt emotional states that I was able to access. I was able to access them using memory, right? Like, I basically go onto my mental hard drive and then access that state. But there's a deeper form of memory. And I first stumbled across this in 2009 when I went to a workshop being led by Chip Chipman and Elsie Spittle and John Chipman. John and Chip ended up becoming dear friends and mentors of mine. And I have no idea what they were talking about that day. Well, I probably have an idea of it now, but I don't remember any of it. Like, I've got no memory of it. But by the end of the day, the feeling in this room and with this group was just incredible. Like, I'd never felt anything like it in my life. And someone pointed it out, and Chip said, there's information in the feeling. And how I've come to make sense of that now is what they led us into was an experience of the feeling of who you really are. It's the experience of remembering what it's really like to be you. And I didn't have a cognitive memory of that at all, but the system has a deep knowing of it, and it's there in everyone. And to my mind, this is at the heart of transformational speaking, is guiding people into a space where they're falling awake to the truth of their being and finding their way into the feeling of that. And that seems to be, while it's there for everyone, it's not necessarily interesting to everyone.
But those that tune into that, get that transformation. That's what's important, right?
Yeah, and those who, in my experience, those who start to get a feel for that, tune into it, often are like, I want more of this. I want more of this.
Thanks for your attention. I look forward to seeing you soon.